Well, joining me now is Sky News Washington correspondent Annalise Nielsen. Annalise, thanks for coming on the program tonight, and we've got to talk about this big Trump address. Now, it seems to have been a really big hit with voters, but what did you make of the address, and specifically the way that Democrats were completely churlish and refused to applaud even a kid with cancer? And the dominant image from the night was an old man, Al Green, waving a stick at Donald Trump like the proverbial old man yells at clouds.
Look, I think what people might not realize is that the partisanship started well before Donald Trump even got in the room. So some of the normal procedures that happen for a State of the Union include a bipartisan delegation escorting the president in. And that didn't happen this time around. The Democrats said from the beginning they wouldn't do that. Basically, none of the Democrats stood while Donald Trump walked into Congress before he delivered his address, the exception being that one congresswoman who held up a sign saying this is not normal as a protest. And they had all planned that protest to wear the pink and to have the signs. And so the groundwork was laid for this well before Donald Trump even had a chance to speak. But by the same token, we did really anticipate exactly what Donald Trump was going to say. It was a very stump-style speech, the kind that we've heard at his rallies for a long time. But I found that interesting in and of itself as well. This wasn't his big retribution tour. This wasn't him, the harbinger of doom and gloom, like we'd been warned that he was going to come back with a vengeance. This was him painting a very optimistic picture. This was him saying that this is the new golden age and enjoying it. He was kind of playful when he was getting shouted down by Al Green, when he was facing protests, and he made good TV out of it, which is what we know of Donald Trump. And I'm not saying there's not retribution to come. I'm not saying he doesn't have some axes to grind. But to establish what this next term is going to be, this was a major moment in this Congress, this joint address. And as you said, record viewers.
Record viewers, and I think 72% of CBS viewers who watched the speech said they approved of the speech. So does this create a problem then for the Democrats, because the midterms are going to be on the horizon before we know it, if they're looking like they're completely churlish? And I mean, you could imagine the ads where they say the Democrats won't even stand and honor, for example, the victim of an illegal immigrant who'd been killed like Laken Riley. And, you know, he gave a very moving talk about that. And then they just sat on their hands.
Oh, and when you won't stand for the US detaining a terrorist who helped kill American servicemen. And I tell you, the number of people I've spoken to over the last week where I've mentioned that and they don't remember what Abbey-gate was. And there is a real divide in America between people who remember and appreciate what a disaster the withdrawal from Afghanistan was and those who just kind of compartmentalized it and moved on. And that division remains. This is still just a very divided population in terms of what they value and what media they consume. And I know we talk about this a lot, but it is such a factor in the US with people, what they consume, and otherwise shut out the other information. And this is why we're seeing this big reset from the White House about how they deal with the press.
Well, it is fascinating because I did spend a couple of hours the morning after the speech reading the New York Times and the Washington Post, and specifically the reader comments. And it does feel like there really are two Americas out there, and they just saw an entirely different speech. But I want to shift on here because we've got so much else to talk about. There has been a lot of talk, obviously, about DOGE and the Department of Government Efficiency, but some of the waste that's being turned up elsewhere is amazing to me, and I was stunned by this revelation in the New York Post. It seems like the Biden administration was shoveling billions of dollars out the door and putting them through bogus charities, including $20 billion to some environmental charities that were brand new, so brand new that they did not even appear in the IRS's charity database. Annalise, this stinks. Can the Trump administration get any of this money back? And more importantly, where did this money go? To line the pockets of Democrats to fight the Trump agenda, I presume.
I guess that's where Elon Musk comes in. But look, James, this is the really interesting thing in all this. The Democrats were basically bragging about this when they were in their final days in office, saying we've done as much as we can to get as much spending out the door to make sure that we can protect climate action. This is exactly what their supporters wanted. And to go back to your earlier point about Democrats, I mean, staring down midterms, we do have to remember it was only 4 years ago that we thought the Republican Party was lost for all eternity, that they were so bereft of leadership that they had no chance. With Donald Trump now out, they had no set leadership. So the Democrats absolutely can come back. But right now, they are just a mess. They have no clear leader because they built everything around Joe Biden, who was so obviously in the throes of cognitive decline, and the entire leadership locked everyone else out, kept them down just to keep Joe Biden in place. And so they don't have any next generation that's ready to stand up and take the lead. When we're talking about who might be the next Democrat president of the United States, they're talking about Tim Walz, who somehow, being a popular governor in Minnesota, apparently managed to lose that own benefit in the last election result. They had a smaller Democrat turnout in their own state. This is the state that, when it was the Reagan landslide, still held on for Mondale, wasn't it? It's just like, so I just, that they are completely lost in the wilderness at the moment, but it's not saying that they couldn't come back.
Yeah, and I'll be talking a little bit later in the program with Mick Mulvaney about another interesting development on that front, so stay tuned for that. But also we need to talk about Ukraine and the latest that's happening there. A week on from that heated exchange between Trump and J.D. Vance and Zelensky in the White House, well, we now have confirmation that the U.S. has cut off intelligence sharing with Ukraine for the first time since 2022. Now, this comes after they'd already halted shipments of military aid to Ukraine. This isn't going down very well with an awful lot of people in Washington, and I got to say across America as well, who think this is going too far. Is this a push to get Zelensky back to the table, and will it work?
Well, it was interesting. The day that that story came out, we had the White House National Security Director and Zelensky both saying that they were preparing to meet that day in response to that. So on the one hand, it does seem like it's working, but on the other hand, for all the discussion around is this bully tactics from America, is it not? This is just the one that seems the most punitive for no real reason. To cut off aid, to cut off further funding, to cut off any further munitions going there, that's all a bottom line question. And they've been very clear from the Trump administration they don't want to send any more money over there. So that's one thing. But to cut off intelligence sharing that you should be already doing regardless. And then I think that's the other unsaid half of this equation. Is this the US saying that they're not gathering this intelligence anymore in that part of the world? Because that's really something that is going to be weakening the US influence around the world and, of course, weakening the Europeans. This is where the US is supposed to be so superior. Or are they getting this information and just not sharing it to punish the Ukrainians and make them more vulnerable? That scene is just very punitive.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to watch this and see how it goes. We've already seen how Europe has reacted. And if there's any good thing about this to come out, it would seem that they're starting to take their own defense seriously in Europe. So maybe that's a silver lining here. Annalise Nielsen, thank you so much for joining me as always.